this first video of the series, we're gonna talk specifically about pawn islands. And normally I'll try to start these videos with first a little bit of theory, what is in this case a pawn island, and then show you a couple of practical examples. And on the Chessable course that I'm making currently, you'll find more examples and also a little bit more tests, so you can really practice yourself with these kind of positions. So here the first game, a clear example of pawn islands. So a pawn island is basically a pawn chain, and a pawn chain in this case can be easily explained by the white position, where here white has a really nice long pawn chain over here and, well, just a single pawn over here. So there are two pawn islands, and the good thing about this is that actually the long pawn chain over here, these two pawns are really nice defended by its pawns next to it, so it's quite safe, it's quite secure. Well, if we have a look at the position of black, then it does have a nice pawn chain here, which is a good one, but it has two isolated pawns here. And the result of having those pawn islands is that normally your major pieces are going to get tied up with defending those pawns. Unless you have some counter chances, of course, that's something quite different. But if you don't have those, then and your pieces are getting bound up, then probably your opponent can start messing around somewhere else on the board, creating additional weaknesses, and at some point it's just too difficult, and one mistake can be the end of the game. So in this case, black is definitely suffering because of this. And the first move that white is playing here is queen c2, making sure that the pawn is being attacked. Rook a to b8, queen c4, a5, queen c5. And this is something that you will see more often, that the square in front of an isolated pawn is a great square to stand on. It's perfect for knights, but also other pieces feel quite welcome over here. And in this specific case, the queen, of course, is attacking both these pawns. It can't be attacked by another piece at this moment, so it is a perfect square to be at and keep black honest in this case. And also the good thing is that actually black is not able to play c5 himself in order to exchange it off with the white pawn, getting rid of the weakness, and then it would be a direct draw, I would say. So queen c7 defending the pawn, and rook b5, which is kind of a nasty but really nice move to play. Well, nasty for black in this case, because he is attacking, of course, a5 another time. He can't take it with the pawn, because then the queen is hanging, and taking with the rook actually gives the issue that the c6 pawn is getting attacked too many times in the end, so you won't be able to properly defend this. And the moment that you can start taking this with, most likely with the pawn, but it could also be that you're taking it with the queen to exchange off as many pieces as possible, but that would mean the end of black, of course. So here queen, so it needs to defend with rook a8, which has been played. Queen c3, keeping everything attacked. Rook c8, already preparing for rook c5, because right now both pawns are actually attacked twice by the same pieces from white. He has exchanged or changed the positions of the rook and of the queen, which is nice, because the queen being a more active piece, it's nice to give it a little bit more freedom, while at the same time, of course, still this rook is doing excellent work on the c5 square. e6, got to play something, and this is a pretty decent move. Rook c1, attacking it for the third time, which makes sure that black has to play rook a8, h4, h4, h5, rook b1, rook a to a8, and g3. And here you can see a principle that you'll see more often in the subsequent videos, is that if you are attacking and you have your opponent tied up, there is no hurry. So just improve your pieces, as long, and that's really important, as long as your opponent doesn't have the opportunity to free himself. But in this case, that's quite impossible. Even exchanging after rooks would already be problematic because then automatically either a5 or c6 will fall. Okay, trying to defend it in a different manner. Rook b to b5, but here you already see the issue. The a5 pawn is being attacked 3 times, and when you would defend it with rook a8, then c6 will fall. So yeah, no hopes for black to keep the pawns. So taking it back with the rook. I mean, your pieces are so active, so why exchange them all? And actually the rook endgame in this position would be quite drawish, most likely. So it's good to not to take with the queen in this case. b7, queen b1, and nice one, trying to get active, trying to get towards the e4 square, for example, hoping for some perpetual checks, or well, at least annoying our opponent a lot, because the moment that you would get here, then you can perhaps go towards f3 attacking f2, or you can start giving checks on this diagonal depending on what white is doing. And indirect also still having c6 defended, because the moment that white would now take on c6, then queen e4 check would make sure that you win the rook over there. So queen c2, quite necessary, but also a good move. You are in a much better position, and in this position you have a perfect opportunity to get this win up and running. Your rook is also perfectly positioned. The reason for that is that we won't have a specific topic on this one, but rooks belong behind the pawns. And reason for that one is that the moment that this pawn is being pushed, white actually gets more and more space over here. So if you would switch up both rooks, then the white rook gets limited in terms of liberty, but in this case it's just really nice to work with it. Queen g7, so here it could have been a nice idea to actually have played rook a5. In this case, rook a6 is definitely mandatory, because if you would allow the pawn to move even one square further, you can't defend the c6 pawn anymore with your rook. So then it will be quite difficult. And what you now see is that this rook is stuck over here, while at the same time white can just play around with his rook and gain some tempi on your opponent. Which in this case wouldn't be necessary, but it's a good thing to remember. King f3, king f6, and king g5. And here you actually don't have any proper moves anymore. f6 would result in f6 would result in king g6, moving away with your king. Then, well, the king gets in, which is horrible. You can't push this pawn, and well, it ends up with playing e5, which according to the engine is actually the best move, but well, you just take it and your hope might be that your c pawn is fast enough, but well, as you can see, the white king is definitely close enough. And the moment that you start harassing this pawn, then well, it's easily defended. You can't even do anything about this pawn because it's even properly defended like this. So yeah, no sweat, so to say. It's an easy win. So to summarize again, 3 versus 2 pawn islands. Make sure that you pin your opponent's pieces to defending those weak pawns, and by that you can start creating additional weaknesses and activate your pieces and go forward. We'll see that more often in the upcoming games. So, and this one is a nice, little bit more classical 1951 play between Vasily Smyslov and Paul Keres when they were under 19. So that's quite a long time ago for them as well. Smyslov passed away, probably Paul Keres as well. I'm not sure about that. But looking at the position, which is quite an instructional one and quite a clear one, so that's why I like to show it to you guys. Here you can see that white is having issues. 2 major parts are important for this. One, he has of course more pawn islands, 3 versus 2. And that means specifically in this case that the e3 pawn is quite weak, and you'll need to defend that. The other weakness that white has over here is that the pawn chain over here on the queen side actually is fixed on the light squares, and because of that the white bishop of white, so the light squared bishop of white is limited in his moves, and actually it gives the opportunity for black to attack and harass the pawns, and we'll see pretty quickly on how bad that will get. And the end result is, because okay, this just one issue wouldn't be the problem, but the combined problems with both the e3 square as well as these pawns make sure that black will activate his pieces more and get his king into the opposite side. So bishop b1, a3, and here a5 is being played, restricting white from playing b4. Otherwise you would run the risk, of course, of white getting rid of his weaknesses. And yes, that means that right now he can defend, of course, the pawn on b3. But this actually already means that this bishop is stuck forever right now on the d1 square. And that's quite simple, because the moment he goes away and this bishop goes towards c2, and he will start mopping up some pawns over there. And then also the c4 square pawn will get weak. Then the next part, getting your king in the center. There's not much risk of getting mated in the middle, so just make him active. King g2, king f5, king f3, making sure that black doesn't get towards this also important e4 square. And this is an important moment to just for yourself to sit down and have a look, okay, what is currently happening? So what do you want to achieve as black? You want to go actually towards the d3 square in the end, because at that moment you can play bishop c2, attacking this one, making sure that the bishop gets away, and if they exchange it off, you just gather all the pawns and make sure that you're winning. So that's quite important. This bishop on d1, as already mentioned, it's stuck, so it can't go anywhere else, because otherwise bishop c2 will end the game. At the same time, right now, white's king is stuck defending the e4 square, because you don't want to get the black king into e4, and well, it will escalate even further. So white is already tied down quite a bit, and your goal is to make sure that actually white's king gets away from here, so you can start walking further. And that means that you will have to, let's clean it up a little bit, you want to play the pawns towards g4, g5 and f5, and then at the right moments play f4, cleaning up the center, making your way for the c3 or the d3 square. So king a5, a4, which makes sense. I think it's one of the few moves that he could play without any risks. g5, king e2, and this is a nice one, a small in-between poke around to make sure that there are even more pawns on white squares. So h4 doesn't really seem to be quite attractive, because at that moment you can you can actually start playing with bishop g4, perhaps even already exchanging it off and making sure that while your king is so much more active, you will be able to get into one of these squares, and you have some tempi to lose, so you can make sure that you're getting there. So actually g4 is mandatory, so that means that all these pawns are potentially weak the moment that the bishop gets to it. King f3, and here f5 is being played already, and yes, the problem here is that f4 might be threatened, and the king is getting pushed away, so you need to take king f2, and here you can already see that white's king is getting quite limited in terms of space, and black is doing that even further. And with this he is pushing the pawns even further down, making sure that this black king, well, it's limited towards the second rank. And that's quite a hopeless position, especially knowing the freedom that black has. And with this move, bishop f5, black is pinning down both pieces of white. So you have the bishop over here that is stuck on the d1 square, and here you have the king that is stuck on going back and forth between h2 and g2, because he will need to defend the h3 pawn. And the cool thing is that yes, your bishop here is stuck doing that task actually, but your king is free to walk wherever you want to. Of course, keep in mind that you can't just walk into e4, because then bishop c2 and you'll just exchange of the bishops, and then perhaps it might be savable, but we'll see in the game that that's not even necessary. So king f6, king e6, and this is actually a nice one, making sure that there is still one tempo to be gained. You could go towards e5, but you want to make sure that the moment that you play your bishop back towards b1 in order to make space for the king to go to e4, that the white king is as far away as possible. King g2 and king h2, and this is the moment indeed to play bishop b1, liberating of course the king of defending the h3 pawn, but because you have timed it in such a way that your king is as far as forward as possible, you can go towards the e4 square, and you can even go towards the 3 square. And yes, they were trying to get the pawns back, but yeah, this is just an easily losing position, because the pawns on the queen side will completely fall one by one, and there is not even counterplay for black. So going towards the next position, we're gonna make it a little bit more complex, having two rooks on both sides and less pawn islands actually. In this case, white has just a single one and a perfect one to be set. I mean, there's just, this is the bottom of the pawn chain, and well, it's perfectly secure. And this is a really nice passed pawn that is defended. Well, black has two issues actually. He does have more pawn islands, so 2 versus 1, and also his king is a little bit less secure. And we'll see that this will become an issue. So rook c2, making sure that black doesn't end up on the second rank, so your king stays safe, and also your pawn chain will stay as safe as possible. King f7 and h4, and here you can see that white is trying to make a second weakness. So the moment that white would just simply play rook a4 and he would do nothing else, then yes, this pawn is weak and it is attacked twice, but you can't even get towards it. Attacking it 3 times, you're not gonna win it over there. So you need to create an additional weakness, and this is what Morozevich, who was on the white side of this game, he's trying to gain space and create additional weaknesses. And this c3 move is actually an interesting one. I checked this move out also with the engines, of course, and I did see that this was the preferred move for the engine for quite a long time. But Glenn Fleer, I got this position from a book from him, Practical Endgame Play, and he actually gave it the dubious annotation towards it. And yes, even though the engines would say at first, okay, this is indeed the best move, I do agree with him. And the reason why is that it allows white to create an additional weakness. And the best move for black would have been in this position to play h5. And this would at least give you the option that the moment that moves like g4, etc. are being played, that you can start trading down pawns. If you're worse, start trading down pawns. If you're better, trade off pieces. But by playing c3, I would even argue that this pawn even gets weaker, because it makes the way for the white king to get towards it. But more important, and it's also being played, g4. Right now black can't prevent g5 being played, even though h6 is there. After g5, takes. Yes, objectively this might still be defendable. Practically it's horrible, and yes, you are a pawn up as black, but you have so many weaknesses, so many pawn islands, that you will never be able to defend it. And actually these pawns from right are still so secure and so safe that there's not an issue defending them. So king g3, rook c4, rook a3, just making sure that everything is tied down, and well, you don't have to worry about that one. King g4, attacking g5, and here black goes towards d6. Keep in mind that even going towards f6, you can just simply play rook back towards a6 and grabbing the pawn and going back again in time. One thing that you do need to take care of is that black won't have the opportunity to put one of his pieces towards b2, because then you will be in a little bit of trouble, because the pawn of course is pushed quite far. So here white can easily take it, and here he is actually pushing for grabbing the center pawn, and after a couple of additional moves, yes, he wins up. He wins back a pawn, and even g4 could fall. But as Nimzowitsch says, passed pawns need to be pushed. I'll leave the game towards here. I'll make sure that in the comments you can find the games back. This was not perfect play after this one, but that didn't matter. The d7 pawn is so strong that yes, he could win pretty easily, at least for grandmaster terms, of course. But this is a really good example on, okay, how can you go from a position that looks, yes, winning better, but how can you get there? That was by gaining additional space on the queen side, making sure that these rooks are tied up defending the pawn, and just getting those small problems one by one towards your opponent. Okay, and then the next game, the second to last, a game between Vasily Ivanchuk and Viktor Korchnoi, two legends, I would say, in the game, played in 2000 in a memorial match. And Viktor Korchnoi, of course, played for quite a long time. Really great chess. This game, what I found really interesting from this one, this is move number 27. So that means that within 26 moves we got into this position, and it was actually a fairly straightforward opening. Nothing fancy, nothing strange happened, no big blunders whatsoever. So it shows that also in the opening you need to be aware already for the positions that can arise in the end game. Where are you going towards? And okay, don't overthink it, because then you will burn up way too much time. But it is something to keep in mind, like, okay, what kind of endgame structures will I get? In this case, you can see that white will be able to play against this additional isolated pawn where there are 3 pawn islands that are there, and especially these two by black are quite weak. And this is a game where a lot of maneuvering is happening, which is objectively definitely sound, and it's okay and it's defendable, but practically, again, the small mistakes add up, and white can make a mistake and just start all over again and get towards there. But as black, every mistake moves you a little bit closer towards losing those pawns and getting into trouble. So here black is playing around a little bit. Sorry, white's playing around a little bit, and you can already see over here that black has been moving around his pawns not in the most practical and best manner, and especially after h5 and queen d4, you can see that white is getting towards a most perfect position. So his queen is perfect. He is attacking both over here as well as attacking the quite weak king in the meantime. Yes, the knight will be kicked away, of course, sad, but these 2 pawns are also quite weak, and the moment that you have to push for f6, then also your back ranks are getting quite weak. But right now, just have a look at the knights as well. So this knight is not that bad. But this knight is actually better. Why? Because it is attacking, of course, the pawn. And the pawn is attacked twice, so that means that you need to start defending it again with the knight. And as a result, both pieces are getting tied up. So the queen, well, it does have these 3 squares to defend both pawns, but that's basically it. And yes, so there was a lot of maneuvering, but they're stuck now defending d5 as well as b6, giving the opportunity to basically do whatever you want as white. F3, king of 8, b4, yes, and this is again the principle of 2 weaknesses in the end game, so important. So you do have a sort of majority here on the queen side if you look at the files A to C. And if you wouldn't take as black, then your white would take, and then a5 would get weak as well, and then probably queen c5 would already win a pawn directly. I don't see a way for black to defend that actually. So here white is doing the right thing by taking with the c pawn like this. Because of that, you do have a real majority on the queen side and the opportunity to create a passed pawn actually. And yes, the amount of pawn islands will perhaps become the same the moment that you start exchanging off the well, these 2 pawns, because you're gonna start pushing that one and then probably they will get exchanged. You will have a passed outside pawn, and the moment that the queens go off the board, then you are definitely in a favorable position. And the good thing is you can actually time that yourself, and you can start making life still harder for your opponent and choose whenever you want to play a4 and a5. Well, a4 is there already, king c8, and getting the kings again towards the center. And yes, the a pawn will need to decide the game in the long run, so therefore you'll move towards there. And he just wanted to win a tempo, and in this case they are going to start pushing it for real. Keep in mind again that the moment that the queens are getting off the board, then black first needs to go towards that one. Well, in the meantime, white will go like that towards that pawn, and he will be definitely winning the game, because the knights will get off the board and he will mop up the other pawns as well. So that's why he can play actually queen c5. And this is where it stops. So there are 2 issues. Either the knight on f6 is lost because of queen c6, or with knight c4 your king is getting in quite big problems, because the queen and knight are working perfectly together in getting a king mated. So just watch out for that one. So then we will go towards the final game as an example. Played between Alexei Dreyev and Sergei Movsesian in 2011 in, I think it's the Russian championships, well, at least the club championships, I think. So differences are quite small over here, and what you see is that black has 1, 2, 3 pawn islands, and white only has 2 of them, and that definitely gives an advantage. Especially the pawn on h7 will become a weakness at some point. So rook c1 makes sense, making sure that you're getting the open files. c5 being played is quite understandable, but it does lead towards another pawn island, and that actually gives an issue. You could exchange off the rooks in between, but that probably doesn't make your life a lot easier. And here you can see again that the pawn is being held captive on the c5 square because of, well, all the pieces defending c4 basically. And if we go a little bit further in the game, then you can see also here in this game that the pieces are stuck quite on the queen side, making sure that everything is defended and or attacked. But this gives the opportunity for white to start expanding on the king side. And with g4 he is actually doing this. And the most human move over here is indeed, and this was also played, is to actually take with the pawn. And yes, you do have the advantage that you are not you are undoubling your pawns, so okay, this saves you a little bit. But it actually opens up this file and makes the h7 weakness available for attacking. So actually not human, but quite practical, or practically better would have been to play h5 and keep the double pawns, allow white to exchange it off, but then this pawn would remain a lot safer. So h8, rook h1, making sure of course that no h5 can be played without exchanging of the pawns, because then a draw would get quite a lot closer because there are still many pieces on the board. f5, okay, so here rook h4 has been played, which is kind of okayish, but a lot better would have been actually to play rook towards h6. As already mentioned, even already in the first game, it is so great to just block those pawns on their weak squares, on their weak positions, and you would have a lot more space to play with, while otherwise the rook would have been stuck on the h8 square. But right now you give him the opportunity to go towards the 6th rank or towards the 7th rank, which is quite a lot more pleasant to play with. Before, and here white is going into the position with its rooks, and you can see that still he has an advantage. His own pawns are quite secure. As a result, black is defending a lot of things at the same time. You can see that the rook is getting overloaded quite a bit, so you could already think about sacrificing your exchange over here. Winning this pawn wouldn't be sufficient right now, but these are motives that you can think about. And in this case you are definitely a lot better. The rooks are so strong, everything is defended pretty well. Your king is a lot safer, and this is the way that white is actually finishing off the game. So this bishop is actually pinned, because otherwise this one will fall. So bishop f7 is quite mandatory. And here this is a nice combination that white is giving up his rook, but for 2 pieces and a pawn, and that means that black is no match for white anymore. He can quite easily advance his pawns and make sure that this pawn will fall, while keeping also b5 safe. So let's go through there. So you can see where the pawn is being pushed, and the pawn's being pushed pretty far, and the rook can't get towards it pretty easily, so the king needs to go towards there. The king is getting cut off, so the rook needs to get into play. Be aware of small tricks like rook e1 winning the bishop. And this is a perfect picture to end the game, and the game was actually ended over here. You are defending all your pawns. I mean, even rook f1 is not possible. the king doesn't get into play, and you can easily grab this pawn, go back, and start pushing the other pawn as well. So yes, a small edge. Probably this also resulted from an opening where perhaps bishop g5 was played, where a knight has been pinned or whatsoever, and been taken on f6. And as a result, the pawn chain of black got broken up basically, and resulting in multiple pawn islands. And those small differences make the big difference in the end of the game. I hope this was useful for you as a first lesson. Please do give me comments in the commentary below. I'll make sure that the links and the annotations towards the games are findable, so I'll make sure you know which games were there. And well, it's the first of a longer series, so stay tuned. I'll make sure that a lot more topics will be covered in the next weeks. And also keep an eye on the links below, because I am trying to convert this also in a chessable course, so you can really start practicing. I do have more games, more examples available, so you can really practice with more items as well, to really get a good grasp of these kind of positions. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next clip.